Hello and welcome. He's one of the few intrepid explorers in the world of photography, disappearing into the wilderness of countries in Asia, Africa and the Middle East, and returning with a remarkable photo record of life on the edge of the planet. This week on One on One, meet the award-winning photojournalist and social activist, Reza Deghati.
Iran was a very different place when he was born there in the town of Tabriz in 1952, growing up in a family with a love for the arts. As a boy, Reza Deghati began teaching himself the fundamentals of photography, quickly realizing it was a powerful tool. It was his ability to capture haunting images of ordinary people that caught the public's eye, leading to him being arrested by the Shah's secret police for posting pictures of poverty in Iran. Reza spent 3 years being confined and tortured in prison, something his lens was later to witness others suffering. He was still in his 20s when he eventually fled Iran, setting up in Paris and quickly building a name for himself as a true adventurer, reaching distant corners of the planet for leading companies such as National Geographic, Newsweek and Time magazine. One of the highlights of his career was getting close to the late Ahmed Shah Massoud, the charismatic Afghan rebel. But there were a string of world leaders captured by his lens, such as the late Benazir Bhutto of Pakistan and Yasser Arafat, the legendary PLO leader. Reza continues his social activism to this day, helping develop media infrastructure in places such as Afghanistan. As many who know him like to say, he's a man who uses his camera as a weapon of peace.
Reza, it's such a pleasure to talk with you.
It's a pleasure for me to see you again after Kabul.
It's been a while, that's right. You know, it's interesting. Your pictures are very powerful, very haunting, the memory lingers. And sometimes it's hard to pinpoint what makes those pictures so special. So I guess it's the million-dollar question. What makes a photograph special?
Well, in my case, I think that the most important things for me as the subject and the pictures, if they touch my heart, if they really pinch my heart and I got emotion, then I know that this is going to happen to others. This is, for me, the main one thing is if it touches your heart, it's going to touch the heart of the other people.
I know you say that your camera is always looking for the truth that hides in the shadows, that often hides in the shadows. What is it you find in the shadows?
Well, in the shadows, exactly what is everybody wants trying to hide it. I mean, these are the main stories that behind the stories or the layers behind what we see normally in the news. And my works was all the times was going a little, just a little, trying to open a little more the curtain, which is totally blocked.
Now, of course, you've traveled the world, you've pretty much covered everything. But having done this for so long and having covered so much across the globe, is it hard nowadays to find something that's unique or original?
In reality, no, because behind each door there is a story. Behind each person there is incredible story. The only things that you need, the only skill that we need is to know how to open the door. And when we are able to open, then the stories comes to us.
When you were born in Tabriz, in Iran, it was a very different place, of course, from what it is now. And I'll get on to the fact you haven't been back since you were young. But what do you remember of those very early years?
Well, it's a small provincial town in Tabriz, but a lot of poetry. This is the most important thing I remember, are these scenes of the biggest poets coming to our home, a friend of my father, and Shahriyar, like, you know, and I was a kid listening just to them, and painters and all those things. So being in contact constantly with the people which had a really, I do recall now that they had a very soft heart. They were artists, most of them. And it changed a lot my whole vision of the world.
How was your relationship with your parents? Tell me about them.
My father, as a government employee, but he was he was in love of the art and books and the poetry and the paintings, everything that was his real main works. In the meantime, he was always trying to explain to us that never forget that we are descendant of the 400 years of the people that they were teachers. and people that they were opposition to almost all the government. He was always telling me that, you know, all times I remember in our history of the family, we had prisoners, we have people that were tortured, we have people that killed, exiled, so be ready for it. And I didn't understand what was all about it.
So there was activism in your family?
Yes, activism, but in a very high intellectual way.
What about your mother?
My mother was the sweetest, obviously the person that you can have. A housewife, a very calm person. I do remember every time that she was saying to us, she was saying that the justice is the best things in the world. And she was always keep saying this word to us, go for justice, justice. This was, and I never understand why. Even now I'm thinking that maybe she has been in her or her family through something, in injustice. That's why she was pushing us toward justice. But it was very nicely, I still remember the little songs that she was reciting.
You were about 14 when you first started taking photographs. Do you remember your first camera?
I do remember. This was the first camera ever I touched and take pictures was my father's camera, a box camera. And this was a time that with all I was seeing on the street, especially the poverty which I was seeing in the street, the little boys which was coming on the school side and all, it was really shocking me. And I was trying to explain to the other people, look, these poor people, we should help them. So I thought maybe drawing would be important, but I wasn't able to do it. It was so difficult. The minute which I saw in the box camera of my father, oh my God, this is how you can frame the thing you see in front of you. This got everything's, you know, and from this moment I never quit the camera with me.
And you also started, you were doing sort of rural society pictures, but you also took pictures of architecture and your surroundings as well.
Obviously, I study architecture, and architecture was very important, and give me possibility of traveling, going to see the monuments, but also going to the villages around it. That was how the big opening for me was. Not only studying architectures, but what architectures brought to me.
Because of course I guess there was no future as a photographer in Iran in those days. So architecture was your course that you studied. How did your parents feel about you going down that line of photography though?
Well, they hated. After when I told them that, you know, after all the years that I study architectures, and I became Mr. Architect, as you know, in our country is called. Mohandes, the engineer, you know, that when I went back to my parents saying that, you know, I love photography and I may go take pictures and start working, and immediately I got, you know, Newsweek, Time magazine, all the big European magazine interested in my work. So people were interested, showing my pictures. But my mother kept till the last times. I was just saying to the people that when we were asking that what your son does, saying that he's an architect and he takes some pictures. Right? This was the time I had already WordPress photo and published for 5 years in all over the world, and everybody knows me as a photographer.
But there was a turning point in your life when you'd come out of studying architecture at University of Tehran, but there was a turning point, wasn't there, when you witnessed one day while you're sitting in an office the demonstrations against the Shah, something that never was really happening, demonstrations against the Shah and the police turning up.
The photography and architecture was almost going always together with me. And after I started working as an architect in an office, it was just 1 year before the Shah regime fell. I heard the demonstration, and obviously it was so impossible to do it. So I went to look at it, and when I saw all these students running around doing this, all this demonstration, talking, and the army came and started shooting them. And there was one of the students that has a small photo camera, and he was running but taking pictures. And this struck me. I said, oh my God, look what's happening on the street, and look the pictures that this guy had. Imagine if I was there, what picture I will take, and I will show to the world, and I will, you know. This was how it takes me 3 hours, Riz, just to stay in front of this window. And when I come back to my friends, I said that I want to take 3 days off. And this 3 days off was 30 years now. 30 years.
It's gone well for you.
I haven't gone back.
It's gone well for you, God willing. Now, it's interesting because you actually were jailed for 3 years. You were only 22 years old, and you were tortured and treated very badly for taking pictures.
I was, during the Shah, arrested because photographing and showing the pictures of the injustice and poverty in Iran in the different places, while the Shah was doing all this memorial for the monarchy, 2,500 years, and they were bringing foods from Paris to the people there, while you had village people dying of the famine. So I was arrested finally. They caught me after a few years running after me, 5 months being tortured, and then 3 years total in prison from age 22 to 25 just for taking pictures. I mean,
and then you had to leave in 1981 and never been back.
Never. I had to leave in 81 because when the new regime came, Islamic Republic, and I was a professional photographer and covering what was happening. There was a huge riots of the Kurds and Baluch and the Turkmens, and I was doing my job, taking pictures. But because I was someone from the country, because also I had all this connection to the different groups, being in prison, I knew everybody. So I was able to get the pictures, which nobody was able to get. And then the regime trying to follow me or catch me, and then I had to flee Iran.
Reza, I have many more questions for you. We're going to take a very short break here, back with more one-on-one in a moment.